everyone and welcome. My name's James Harding. I'm the editor of Tortoise, the founder of Tortoise. Mo and Alice, a huge welcome to you. When we set up Tortoise, part of the thinking was that it's a brilliant thing being a journalist. You get to meet extraordinary people like the two of you, but it's not fair that only journalists should meet them or only journalists should ask them questions. So when we think about these, our think-ins, the idea is that I might pop a few questions to you, but really importantly, we end up having a conversation in the room. And obviously, through the course of COVID, we discovered that the room didn't need to be just here, but there are people watching at home who will chime in too. And I suppose the reason I'm just setting that out as we start is that in the book that you've written, I think that every single person's experience of it is going to make for a different reading. I suspect that every person comes to stress with a different but deeply personal point of view. I suspect that if you're here, you know why you're here. I don't need to give a huge introduction to Mo Gawdat and to Alice Law, but each of them have come to think about stress from the most unlikely combination of places. I think, Mo, when I think about what you've done at Google X, what you've done in terms of the books and the personal stories you've written, and Alice, when I come and, having read a little bit about your story and about how you got to thinking about stress and how you got to advise people to rethink their relationship with their lives and with stress, it's quite an amazing thing the two of you kind of came together. Yeah. So why don't we start there? Why don't we start with each of you explaining how you, if you like, seized upon stress as an issue that you thought we all need to think about and talk about a little more. So Alice, why don't you start?
Yeah, so I didn't think I was going to be involved in stress whatsoever growing up. I thought I wanted to do fashion. I went to do that at university.
You're doing well?
Yeah. Only by comparison.
And I went to go and work for Net-a-Porter, doing a graduate scheme after university. And was like, I'm going to go and set up my own fashion line, and always did that every summer, stuff in fashion. And then I essentially went to what I call in life stress school. So I had loss consecutively in every aspect of my life, one after the other. So it started when my dad went into sort of financial crisis, was an entrepreneur in the 2008 credit crisis. All his businesses started to go under and he had to put it into administration, which is a very stressful time for our family. We were forced to sell our home and everything became quite, scary at that point. My dad was a very charismatic human being and had always grown up just not really seeing him stressed at all. He was great at being really present and always there and working hard, but doing the great balance of both. And when that time came, he started to have extreme, I could see him be really stressed for the first time in my life. And at that period, my eldest half-sister, Suzanne, suddenly got diagnosed with colon cancer out of the blue. And so that understandably was extremely stressful for our family. And we had 4 years of her being really ill, which was awful. And devastatingly, we lost her to cancer. And at that time, my dad was so stressed and depressed because he had, his business had gone under. He'd lost his eldest child. He had a lawsuit against him that he only managed to prove was wrong later down the line, which causes a huge amount of stress. I was working in financial services as a PA at the time to two MDs. It was my job to remember stuff. I couldn't really remember my own name. I was so stressed and anxious. I used to wake up worried to look at my phone in case I had more bad news from my family. And 4 days after my sister's funeral, my dad was rushed to hospital with a blood clot because he'd been so, depressed from just grief, hadn't really moved and been off his bed. But they scanned his body, blood clot was resolved, but they found that he then had cancer again. And so he refused to treat it at this point. He'd kind of given up. He was so apathetic. He was just, just done. And so that caused me a lot of stress, understandably. I spent a lot of time fighting with him, trying to be like, when are you going to get treatment? What are you going to do? And I realized at this point, I had a breakup from someone that I thought I was going to be with forever, and I then got made redundant because my job left the UK market. And so I basically had
like a country and western song.
I basically had to stress continually everything one after the other. And I gave myself actually, a health scare because I had such bad IBS from stress at this point. They thought that I then had colon cancer, like my sister. And so I realized I really needed to learn how to deal with this because everything was completely out of my control. And so I started to, at this point, self-study. I was working for two wonderful people who, I mean, they'll listen, read my book and be like, they were paying me to do nothing. They used to go out for long lunches or go traveling, and I'd be like reading under my desk and self-studying all the stuff I now teach. But it was, I looked at like stress from the body, the mind, energy. So I wanted to understand it from all aspects. And it really started to make me feel like myself again when I learned mindfulness and meditation, all these different things. So I was like, okay, maybe I should actually do this for a living. When I got made redundant, that was a blessing in disguise because my old bosses helped me set up my now practice, and I started studying in the modalities I knew would work. And it was then, I was doing this, consulting for, executives and companies. And then it was 4 years after my sister died that my dad was rushed to hospital with a burst stomach ulcer that burst and caused internal complications. And so we lost him, to stress-related illness in the end. And so I'd really seen, I always say to Mo, like, I lost my sister once, I lost my dad twice because he was so depressed and stressed for those 7 years leading up to his actual physical loss. But it was kind of really cemented what I wanted to do because I don't want people to have to go through that as a family or as an individual. And that was when after that I met Mo through seeing him speak at a talk virtually online in COVID. I was doing a sort of side talk and he was the keynote speaker for Google Online. And I was like, oh, this guy would be great for my podcast. So at this point he had, not as many followers as he has now. So I sent him a DM on Instagram, asked him if he'd be on my podcast, and he kindly said yes. And then I went on his, and then, we started to do this work together.
Alice, firstly I want to say I'm so sorry.
Oh, thank you.
That is a lot to hear. I mean, you can hear we all kind of laugh nervously hearing quite so much. No, but I think that like being exposed to someone else's kind of pain and grief and, bewilderment all it's a lot. And I think we're going to get into how you kind of take those things apart. But Mo, when I was the same to you, how did you come to stress? Not exactly. That's cheating.
So I actually thought my whole life that I was working on happiness mainly. That's because of a small story. When my daughter was 5 years old, and my daughter's really full of life, and I remember vividly the time where I broke her heart. Really, I simply, she was jumping up and down of joy, like what we're going to do on a Saturday. And I looked at her like the annoying, grumpy businessman I was at the time, and I basically said, "Can we please be serious for a minute, right?" And I could see her cry because of me, and that grumpiness made me want to work on happiness. And I worked on happiness for maybe 12, 14 years. And there was a very unusual symptom every time I gave a speech about happiness, especially in the early years. And especially in certain countries. There are certain countries in the world where the very first question that comes to me after a talk about happiness is like, we understand this works, but why should we care? Like, why should we be happy, right? And in a very interesting way, I was almost militant in my response. And I couldn't understand why. And when I met Alice and we started to talk, Alice said, we should write about stress. I was like, nah. Who cares? And she basically helped me uncover that I was so militant because my dad died in my own arms as a result of stress. My dad, like Alice's, which I feel I know him really well because of how we worked together. My dad was an incredible, he was a math prodigy. He was a really good engineer. He really made a difference to his country. He ran the road and traffic department for the largest construction company for a very long time. And so most of the bridges and tunnels and the entire infrastructure was his work. And then when the CEO changed, I think must have been 25, 28 years in my dad's career, they gave him another department. And so somehow he was obsessed with one thought, and that thought was they never appreciated me. And the only image I have of my dad in the last 4 years of his life is him coming back from work, beaten up, defeated if you want, sitting in his living room with no light on, okay, for 4 hours, completely depressed. And I loved him deeply, and I would really try to spend time with him and chat about entertaining things and, ask him if we can go and cook together and whatever. I really tried to get him out of it, and I just couldn't. And then 4 years later, in a very unusual sequence of events, he was lying in my arms and leaving us. And I sort of went on with my life. I was about to get married and, went on with my life thinking that this was just what happens. You live, you die. And it became so interesting when Alice highlighted that stress is the enemy. Really, it killed my dad like it killed yours. And in an interesting way, I realized that I actually, like most of us, I'm not talking about it. I'm letting it eat us from the inside, okay? And I'm not even aware that it's a problem. I'm not even aware that it is something that we need to address. And I think that's the biggest issue with stress in our modern world today, is that we assume that it's a reasonable tax to pay to be successful in life. I mean, you and I, when the last time we were having a talk together, so many stressed people in the room defending stress.
Yeah.
Defending it, saying like, yeah, but that's how it should be, right? Like we're here to, squeeze another 2% of performance out of our, fading bodies and tense minds, and we just think that this is how it should be.
So one of the things that Unstressable does as a book is it's just in the very opening chapter or two, it actually makes you feel better about being stressed because you realise quite how much there is out there.
Yes.
I'm going to skirt past that. I'm going to get to the component parts of stress and wonder whether you could help us understand that, because I think one of the kind of shared experiences of stress is the feeling of being overwhelmed, that there are so many things that seem to be playing on each other. And you, if you like, disentangle that quite neatly. So I wonder whether you'd start with that, how we understand what the component parts are.
I talk about the big picture, and then we jump into the detail together. So you could say that stress attacks you from 4 directions and affects you in 4 parts of you, right? It attacks you from what we call a ton of stress, TONN, which is trauma, obsession, nuisances, noise and nuisances, right? So basically, Alice will talk about that in a minute, but there are different ways you can look at where you're stressed based on how big the stressor is and where it's coming from, inside you or outside you. And that stress then affects you in your mind, heart, body, or spirit. Spirit here, if you're not a religious person, you don't have to be. Spirit here is your non-physical form, the non-physical part of you, your consciousness, if you want. Right? And the interesting challenge is that most people would lump up all of this and say, if you're stressed, meditate. Doesn't work, right? I mean, it works, honestly, but it works on one modality for one of the ton, right? And what we attempted to do with Unstressable is to tell people, look, you have to know where it's coming from, right? And then you have to know where it's hitting you, because the way stress hits you differently makes your modalities, your mind, your heart, your body, and your spirit talk to you differently in 4 different languages. And if you understand those languages, one, you will notice that you're stressed, believe it or not. Every single one in this room, including myself, is more stressed than we give ourselves credit for, right? I mean, last week for me was a nightmare. It was truly and honestly, and I'm not ashamed to say, I'm talking about Unstressable, but life is stressful.
Why, Mo?
Oh, so many things. You want to go there?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, my mom's on her deathbed, and it's been 3.5 months, and my mom's she's an incredibly independent and very strong woman, and to see her in that space is quite. It's very difficult for me to see her in that space.
I'm sorry.
But on top of that, when you want to tell the world, I have a mission of taking 1 million people out of stress every year, I think the universe sort of goes like, are you qualified?
Right.
Really.
Of course.
Yeah, so on top of that, I had a horrible unethical move by a business partner that would have meant that the business would have to, one of my businesses would have to shut down, and a lot of people would lose their jobs. And so I had to step in and save it somehow, while at the same time losing my wallet and all of my government documents, while at the same time we had the floods in Dubai, while we had at the same time so many things at the same time. It was quite an overwhelming ton of stress, and I have to admit to you, when we are in those situations, we sort of go like, yeah, it's a little tough. You have to go a lot more granular than that. So you have to understand exactly where it's coming from and where it's hitting you to be able to respond to it and speak its language. So,
can I also, Alice, can you just pick up on that thing? So mostly to get into the detail. Just before you get into the detail, though, I think one of the really interesting elements about stress is you do generally hear the same thing from people when they talk about stress, which is lots and lots of things all at the same time.
yeah.
And so just because I appreciate trauma is different from that, right? Obsession is different, noise and nuisance, they're different. What is it about the coincidence of things that makes for stress?
Well, I mean, first of all, everyone has different stress thresholds. So, like, what might stress me out won't stress Mo out, and vice versa, or you, because we're all, essentially, our system is kind of wired in different ways from, say, for example, if someone, I had someone on my podcast, for example, who doesn't find hospital stressful at all because he used to go in from age 7 with his dad, and because it was like a sort of playful kind of environment for him as a child, he used to go and it was normal. He doesn't find going into hospital stressful. Whereas when I sort of got thrown into going in my 20s to be around my family all the time, I was like, wow, this is a really intense environment because I'm not used to it. So everyone has different stress thresholds. But the reality is like you say, if you have multiple stresses coming at the same time, there's a few of those we can limit, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But the reality is we can't change what goes on around us. You can only change what goes on within you. And so it's learning about how to actually manage your own response and change it from a reaction to a response. Because when we can kind of accept the fact that the modern world is stressful, and it's actually, if you've chosen to be in it, everyone in this room, living in London or near London, is subjected to multiple mini and large stresses every day just by being in the modern world. And so I think it's like that conversation needs to also switch to understanding that if you've chosen this, which we all have, you need to realize that your system's being stressed without you even feeling stress at the time.
Speaking of which, is there a strange buzzing sound?
Right over here. Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, is it stressing you?
Somewhere there.
It's not stressing me, but I just suddenly thought that, we're trying to bring people together, make sure they're not particularly stressed. If you have an oral set of issues, which it turns out I now do. Is it, Connor, do you know what that is? Do you think that's the lights?
It is this.
I think it might be the light, yeah.
Maybe your light as well.
Now I've drawn your attention to it, it's really, really going to wind everyone up.
I
You're
like it,
totally
really.
dull to it.
You're not.
Right.
But can I add to this? I think it's
sure.
really important. So from my experience last week, look at that.
There you go,
I say, you're unstressing people even as you go. Look at that.
That's an amazing impact. and now suddenly I have nothing more to say. It's so looking at last week. So I, what we do is we overdo being a hero. Right? So when you start getting stressed, you start to juggle things. Like, I can handle this. I had a lovely conversation with my wonderful wife, Hannah, about this, because I break at the very, very, very end. I can carry so much, you have no idea, because I think life has trained me with a whip, really, right? And I break at the very end, like I think a lot of people would break before my threshold. But as I'm approaching that threshold, and I think that's true for every one of us, you keep saying, yeah, why not add this and add that? Yeah, I'll juggle this a little bit and then, deal with that and so on. And they keep piling up. And you cannot afford to miss the reality that the reason I lost my wallet is because of how stressed I am. Right? I'm rushing around. I have so many things on my mind. I remember vividly the last time I saw it, but I don't know what happened afterwards. And it's clearly... when you're stressed, you're not at your top performance, and so you break things, and as you break things, you stress more.
Can I say one thing? I really am serious about weighing in. So it's not like, we're going to have 5-10 minutes at the end where you come to a question. Just grab mine out, and if there's anything that Mo or Alice have said that you want to weigh in on, do just just wave or interrupt. But can I ask you a question about the way, I'm interested in what you're doing here. Because, you know, I mentioned kind of in passing, Mo, that, you know, things that you've done at Google X, but actually the truth is you had a colossal job, right? You know, building that innovation, that kind of moonshot unit at Google is like globally impactful. So you know very well what it is to be in a public space as a semi-public figure.
Yeah.
And then choosing to talk, as you just did, as you did, Alice, too, about your sister, your father, your mother. You're clearly making a choice about the way in which you set a line for what's shared. And I'm interested in what you think that does and what the point of that is.
You and I know very well, right? We mix with the richest and the most powerful men out there and women out there. Yeah, we're all human. Truly and honestly, I think that's the bit that most people misunderstand. There is a lot that you see, especially on a little screen or on someone sitting on a stage far away from you, that is not reality at all, okay? I do not know a single human that doesn't break. I do not know a single human that doesn't cry, at least is supposed to cry. You know, we're all human. We all want the exact same things. We all are going through the same school, if you want, okay? And what I have learned, because I really think that one of the biggest challenges with the modern world is that we assess success with wealth and power, okay? I assess success with enlightenment. So I've met some of the most enlightened people on the planet. And I will tell you openly, the closer you get to that point in your short experience here, the more you realize that those people not only learn to become human, more and more human, they learn to become kids. I tend to believe that we are our best version as children. Okay? Alice writes in Unstressable that no child is ever born unstressed. Right? I wrote in Solve for Happy that no child is born unhappy unless you really expose it to a lot of negativity during labor and so, or pregnancy and so on. And we are honest, we're playful, we're loving, we're tremendously cute. I don't know what happens to us, right? And you really have to start thinking about this. We as we ascend to success, which in my view is really to understand yourself, to really get to know yourself, to really find it in you to love everyone, okay? As you go through that journey, you're really going back. You're not going forward. It's so interesting, huh? You come out of that child purity and innocence into the real world. They jolt you in school and say, sit down, don't speak for 7 hours, physics matter. What? Right? And you get serious about it, and then you forget. The truth is, you can continue on that trajectory for the rest of your life, and instead of making 1 million, make 1 billion. Doesn't make any difference. I'll assure you that. Okay? And then, eventually some of us wake up and say, hey, you know what? This is all about love and enlightenment. That's it.
And Alice, it's interesting the way you framed it, and interesting the way you frame it in the book, because there are elements of this which people would say, you're talking here about love and loss and fear and grief, deeply human things that have been around for a long, long time. And then there are things that you're talking about which feel like, as you call it, noise and nuisance, things that are in the workplace, in urban life. And so how do you understand the extent to which kind of modern expectations are aggravating human emotions?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the expectation game is a huge reason for stress in terms of comparison because of social media today. That's why, the younger generation today, like Gen Z, are the most stressed ever. That's statistically, which is really sad because of social media. You wake up in the morning and you're looking at what everyone else is doing, and that's the only time in history where we're in information. Well, yeah, exactly. Information overload. And so we've never been subjected to having to be able to see stuff that's causing us stress without even realizing. So that noise and nuisance, for example, you talk about, a lot of the time we don't realize that our brain, for example, cannot tell the difference between something happening in front of you or something happening in your own mind. So we can set our stress response off from watching the news just as we can from being there in that moment. And we can set our stress response off from our thoughts, from like comparing the fact that you saw someone on holiday and they're having a great time and you wish you were there yourself, and going into this rabbit hole. And so the extent of it is that this noise and nuisance, like we call it, nuisance is that micro external stressor. It's your aggressive morning alarm that's on factory setting that jolts you out of bed. It's the traffic jam. It's the WhatsApp notifications, stressful email from your boss, the news 17 times a day. All these little things add up. So you think, okay, well, one nuisance won't break you. Of course it's not. Like, no one's going to, die from having one WhatsApp notification. But the reality is that who in this room had one WhatsApp notification today?
So let's do some of these things like practically. The phone. I'd quite like to be unstressed. What should I do about the phone?
A cemetery, for starters.
Just bury the phone.
If you can have even just, so like being unstressful, you can do 5 minutes a day of different things that makes a huge difference. But for your phone, for example, the average person now, studies show, picks up and touches their phone and swipes their phone over 3,500 times a day. Or 2,500, sorry. 2,500 times a day, which is a crazy, crazy amount. And the reality is that's because you see it and it's there, and we're in this automatic sort of dopamine hit. Oh, I'll just check and see if anything's on it. And you might not even have a message to check. So, for example, just putting your phone in like a graveyard, I call it, for an hour at some point in your evening. So you say, okay, I'm going to put it in a drawer, out of sight, out of mind. For that hour, the world's not going to end in that hour, let's be honest. No matter how important anyone's job is, if you put an hour in the evening, your phone in a drawer, and actually decide to truly connect your loved ones, be fully present in what you're doing, whether that's, an active relaxation of actually, cooking and actually being present, or reading a book, or whatever it is you want to do, actually having connection with humans, because, we know that real connection is such a reduction for stress.
So does anyone here who wants to speak? Lady in green, yes, with... there's someone may have a mic.
There is a mic.
Oh, no, sorry. There's a gentleman here who's got the mic, and then I'm going to come to you. Sorry, forgive me.
Thanks. I was wondering, to what extent are we actually supposed to carry stress individually versus collectively? And how much of us, let's say, managing stress is us changing our perspective towards it versus us living in a community where we can kind of start to share some of those burdens? Like, you hear studies where people who have a difficult time of work, one person will handle it well because they've got that community outside, they've got their activities, they can leave it there, versus somewhere where it becomes their whole world.
That's a great question.
That's a great question.
So your answer.
I'll go first. I think so. With stress, like you say, the community is such a huge factor, and some people obviously struggle because of loneliness, and isolation can actually breed stress in itself. The individual responsibility, for everyone has an individual responsibility to try and manage their stress as best as possible. And what I mean by that is that we know that stress is actually contagious. So studies show that cortisol actually seeps through skin. Well, like if I'm stressed around Mo, that he might get stressed, or vice versa. So that everyone has that experience where you're at work and your boss is really stressed and everyone's kind of on edge as soon as they come in. So it does, energetically and scientifically, it's contagious. So I do believe everyone has the individual responsibility originally of, okay, what can I actually do to the point of my own? Because if I know I can do as much as I can do to a certain level to manage my stress, then you've done your part, right? But the collective responsibility, I do feel that the more we actually go back into the reason why people weren't stressed, partly in cave times, is because, we lived in these communities of tribes supporting one another. Childcare wasn't a thing because you had 17 grandmothers who were doing shifts with the mothers and vice versa. It's that community does hugely help with stress. But I think obviously in some scenarios, people will have families that are very supportive, other people don't. And equally in a workplace, you might be in a workplace that is incredibly, into this kind of thing. And it's like, okay, I know how to support my staff and, take up the mantle when one is down and, have that sense of community. other workplaces are horrific, and they just think, let's, try and make this as productive as possible in the most counterproductive way, because we're actually 31% less productive when we're stressed and unhappy, which is crazy. So I think, if you're in a situation where you feel like you don't have collective community, support, do as much as you can individually, because the one thing we always have control over is our own individual response, like I said before. But equally then, it's like I think about finding communities that can support you, because there are communities out there. That's why like Mo and I started our community, because we wanted to create a space where people have those conversations to share vulnerably and support one another. And I think that as a society, we won't get to the point we need to get to unless as collectively everyone realizes how much of effect stress has on the world and is damaging it. But individually, equally, we won't get to that point as a society if not every single individual starts to take that own personal responsibility for how their stress affects their families as well as themselves, if that makes sense.
Yes, sorry. Oh, will you say your name? Sorry, because otherwise I won't know.
Christina. So my question came from something that you mentioned before, Mo. So from my experience, what's helped me massively with stress management is changing my kind of perspective on success, which is something that you said, right? Typically, we associate it with power and wealth. And for me, it's actually to do with being at peace. So my question is, you kind of mentioned it in passing, but you say at some point you just wake up and realize that success is enlightenment. So I'd love to know, what was that point where you kind of woke up, and how do you kind of encourage or support others to, get to that shift in their perspective?
It's sad, really, but it was when Ali left. So Alice writes it differently. I tend to believe that life is not annoying, right? That life pushes you for one of two reasons, either to learn or to change direction. When Alice wrote that, she said to heal or to change direction, which speaks to that interesting yin and yang that we are, right? So to me, learn is cerebral and analytical and knowledgeable and is important and so on. Her very feminine view is to heal or change direction. It seems to me, and I have zero scientific evidence to tell you this, that we're all more or less going through the same journey, okay? Dressed in different colors and going through it slightly differently and, at different times and so on. But it's almost exactly the same journey. It's a little bit of challenge around love. It's a little bit of challenge around self-worth. It's a little bit of a challenge around, fitting in or fitting out, and so on and so forth. And I'm really, maybe at the end of my life, I'll write something about this. But if you really observe the patterns, you could almost call them out. It's like, they're going through that phase, or they're going through this phase. And we all go through those things. The interesting thing, though, is that for most of us who go through that turn to enlightenment, to actually really leaving the physical world, like the Sufis will say, to start to die before you die. Okay, the Sufis have that concept of living fully in life, feeling love, passionately about everything and everyone, including the divine, and yet not give a shit about life at all. Okay, and it's a very, very, very unusual, and if you get it, it's such an interesting place to be. Right? Because you're full of joy with no attachment whatsoever. And sadly, most of the people that actually get it when life hits them on the head. Right? And I keep telling people that if you get it, life won't need to hit you on the head. Okay? And sadly, life had to hit me on the head. And I now look back at it, and I almost look at it as a gift. And I know that sounds really, 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 really weird. Right? But if you really take the magnitude of the events, the difficult events of my life, I've been blessed because the difficulty didn't only fix me a little bit, but it actually impacted on the rest of the world as well, which I think is really massive. But I look back and I look at 2011, because I had the full notes of Solve for Happy. I had them in 2011. Then I refined them in 2012. And then I, looked at them and expanded them in 2013. But I never got to write them. And life was saying, right, solve for happy, right, solve for happy, right, solve for happy. I always had that other $1 billion deal that I needed to close with Google, and this new innovation that was driving me, excited, and I wanted to look at it and so on. And I always told myself, there will be a time, right? And, reality is you're a gear in a bigger machine. I'm not writing Solve for Happy to be a bestseller. I'm writing Solve for Happy because there is something in the rest of the world that was about to happen in 2023, 2024, where life becomes very stressful for everyone. And there is a sequence of events that you're part of, right? And so sadly, life said, I said write it, and took Ali, okay? And I tell people, don't wait. When you get, Alice speaks about that so beautifully in the last chapter of the book, the spiritual sovereignty, you call it, sovereignty. That there is always that little whisper happening inside you saying, you're not in the right place. Like, go there, you need to be there. And you just keep ignoring it. And then, poof, life nudges you, okay? That right place, I tell you openly, is found in that idea of to die before you die. Okay, I still run businesses. I still make shitloads of money. I have no idea why. Okay, I really don't understand why. And I honestly and truly don't give a shit about any of it. I honestly and truly don't even know why I'm doing it. Okay, and I think that place is true joy. That place is to be able to own the entire world, but not let the world own you.
But Mo, can I say, I find it incredibly moving when you talk about your son and you talk about that in front of people. I think that's an incredible thing to do. I also don't know how we deal with this stress, because in the book and in everything you say, you start with trauma. And and we've all got different versions of it.
Yeah.
It is a very, very difficult thing to bring to
It's not at
your
all.
schools.
So trauma capital T, okay, is very different. So trauma capital T, 91% of all of us, 9 of every 10 people in this room will get at least one, maybe several PTSD-inducing traumas in their lives, right? So that's like the extreme of trauma, losing a loved one, massive breakup, being in an accident, and so on. 93% will recover in 3 months. 97% will recover in 6 months. And all of them will enjoy post-traumatic growth. Trauma is not the issue at all. Trauma is not what breaks us.
No, I'm not saying. Sorry, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying let's be kind of phobic of trauma. What I'm saying is, if you want to understand stress and the way in which you stress people and people get stressed by you, you have to be able to communicate about that.
Correct.
And that's not something that we do readily or easily.
Yeah, because we have to pretend to be important, and keep it all inside and pretend to be resilient, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do we deal with that?
I think it goes back to that one. It's a cultural thing in a lot of places, I mean, we're all in Britain, and that has been a stiff upper lip, generational thing for a long time. That's a problem. But I think it starts with, vulnerability. It takes courage to be vulnerable. But the reality is that vulnerability breeds connection. And the reason why people feel connected to Mo's story when he first wrote his book was because Ali was a thread throughout the whole book, and it wasn't just about textbook happiness, for example. And that's why we wanted to put our stories threaded throughout this book, because the reality is that when you feel a tiny bit of connection, it doesn't have to be the same story. When someone's open enough to share, then they see a part of themselves in you, and it's reflected back, and they think, okay, this is a safe space to actually, maybe I'll be vulnerable enough to share my story. And it does take courage, to do this. It's, that first point, I think, for years, when I was going through this period of time, between my sister and my dad, actually it was just after my sister died, I really struggled to share with any of my friends, because I was in this space where I just felt like I had to hold it together for my family, for my dad. My friends had just sort of left university, and it was like that time of partying. Everyone's doing their first job. No one's taking it that seriously. Everyone's just, living their lives. And I was really, really struggling on the inside. And I think the difference it made to me when I actually started to, I guess, be brave enough to share to friends that I actually could trust, and see their kind of like, oh wow, what are you actually sort of dealing with right now? The weight of relief that gives you from humans. It's like no one has to solve the problem for you. But in terms of stress and this kind of side, connection and just being able to share is such an important part of it, because carrying that alone in any capacity, whether it's, you know, you're dealing with a breakup, whether you're dealing with the death of a loved one and just pretending everything's fine, eventually it catches up with you. You know, we suppress our emotions so much as a society, but an emotion never disappears. Negative emotion, it just waits under the surface to one day come up. And, you know, I actually had that experience of after my sister died. Like I said, I suppressed my emotions for a while, and all of my emotions from that came up in my breakup, because it was like something else came and made me really, you know, heartbroken, and everything came out at the same time. And that's the reality that can happen to a lot of us unless we actually are like, okay, you know what, I'm dealing with something right now, I'm going to share it with someone and start that.
So there's a point here, and then I'm going to come to you. Yes.
My name is Judah. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much. I haven't read any of your books. I've put the advance, so I don't know if this question makes some sense. So you mentioned your, actually 2 questions. So the first one is, you mentioned you had this kind of framework of ton. And I was just interested in the methodology used to get to that, because it's an interesting 4 things to land on. So perhaps a little bit of a, that would be really useful.
Question,
And then the second one, Alice, you mentioned the 5 minutes a day for us all to be happy and completely stress-free and go into the eureka. And so I just wondered whether you might be able to share that as well. So I guess both questions are for you.
I really appreciate when the questions are for us. I'm a bit jet lagged, so she's doing so
Yeah, so
well.
the time model, so in stress management in general, you always look at macro and micro stresses, and that mainly looks at the outside world. So there's external things, but Mo and I obviously realized that a lot of stress is self-generated, and that internal piece, that narrative that we create in our minds, was how we then got to the internal. So we did macro external was trauma, macro internal was obsessions, which is that continual narrative in your head. It's that one story that, you know, everyone will know when they have an obsession, because it's that one thing they keep telling themselves over and over again that comes up every day and it causes you stress. And then the micro internal was the noise, because obviously we don't just think in these huge ways. We also say to ourselves, oh, I looked tired and fat today in the mirror. And that's just a bit of noise. It's a niggle. It's not a story. But, you know, tiny little bits add up. And then the nuisances was the micro external. But yeah, for us, we wanted to look at the internal piece as well as the external, because half of our stress really is self-generated in terms of our minds. Because if we have 80% negativity bias, all of us as humans, and which means our brain is hardwired to look for threats to keep us safe, that negative piece. And so it's changeable. We know from neuroplasticity, it doesn't mean we're going to have 80% negative thoughts the rest of our lives. But when we practice the good, we practice gratitude, we practice these kind of techniques to help train our brain. Okay, look for the positive instead, see a different perspective. That percentage shifts because of neuroplasticity, thank goodness. So because today, you know, our brain set off from different threats. It's just trying to scan and look for everything. So yeah, that's how we came up with our TUM model, because
There is a very important thing to understand, yeah, from a mathematical point of view. Just take an average view and say, okay, so if the obsessions and noise are coming from within you, that in itself shows you how much control you have over half of your stress, right? And most of the time, of course, it's very difficult to overcome obsessions, but noise is just a habit. Okay, noises are normally just the voice of your teacher, or the voice of your annoying boss, or the voice of your parents when you were young, just constantly telling you, you should do better. It's like just constantly niggling and poking you. And you know, I don't mean you specifically, but every one of us, right? So the idea is that so much of this is happening within us. It's not, you know, the death of my mother, or, you know, the journey that she's going through. That's an event that happens from outside me. But all of the other narratives that I can create around it would kill me. Okay, the narrative of look at that strong woman now not so strong, or the narrative of, you know, why didn't I do this, or the narrative of, you know, why did that happen when we argued. And I can take all of these, or I can take other narratives all together and say, oh my God, you know, the only way I could lose her is to have her in the first place, right? The only way I could care about losing her is because she meant so much to me. The only way I can love her so much is because she gave me reasons to love her. And then you change the narrative, and 50% of the stress goes away. So I am in celebration, believe it or not. My mom, for the last 3.5 months, I'm in celebration of that amazing woman. And I tell her, right? And nothing in the real world changed. She's still in the hospital. But inside you, all of that's happening inside you, at least half of your stress, I would probably say even more. At least half of our stress is happening from within us. And when you recognize the ton as external and internal, now Alice would also tell you, by the way, that a lot of the noise is within your control. Why is the alarm so annoying in the morning? Right? Why don't you find a nicer alarm? Yeah, nuisances, right? A lot of the nuisances. You say this so much better than I do. Do it.
Hold on, can you do the 5 minutes? And also I'm going to take a few pictures of this person here, and then 1, 2, 3, I'm going to come.
5 minutes ritual.
Yeah, so
Say it in 2.
external stressor. So when you have 5 minutes in your system to put it into parasympathetic state, which is all rest and digest, makes a huge difference, because with chronic stress, what happens is that our body becomes in fight or flight all the time, simply by being set off continually by outside stressors without us realizing. And then what happens is it builds up over time. It's like, that one more thing gets added. Your system is constantly in this reactive mode. And so one thing then is the straw that breaks the camel's back, and you end up snapping at your loved one or whatever it is. So our body is constantly in the modern world thinking it's in fight and flight and not safe. So when you can do 5-minute practices, which I'll say now, to create a tiny bit of space in your day, to put it back into parasympathetic states, that makes a huge difference. And every single person always says, like, whenever I work with a client, it's always like, I don't have enough time, I'm so stressed, I don't have enough time to do stress management. I'm like, this is exactly why we need to work together, because a lot of people don't realize you don't need to do an hour and a half of this a day. I don't have an hour and a half a day to meditate, but I have 5 minutes to do practices literature throughout my day if I know that I don't have any time that morning, but I always make time for my morning ritual. So I'm talking about, for example, if you only have 5 minutes in the morning, you can wake up in the morning and have, for example, I put a post-it note on the side of my bedside table if I know I'm in a sort of more stressful, negative headspace that week. And that will remind me when I wake up in the morning, it says, choose your first thought of the day. That initial first 5 minutes is so important, because how you set your morning up sets you up for the rest of the day. It will decide whether you go into reaction instead of response. A lot of people have children, they run in and it's screaming, and I understand that. But then if you can choose to then go back and do 5-10 minutes, it will change your entire day. So choosing your first thought, setting an actual intention of being like, okay, today I want to be X, Y, Z, or today I'm going to feel calm, instead of waking up in the morning and allowing your brain to go, okay, what do I need to do today? What am I thinking about? Oh, that's that, and it goes into reaction straight away. So choosing your first thought.
Coffee.
Not
Sorry.
Not having coffee for the first 45 minutes to half an hour, because
That's true.
If you're a highly stressed and anxious person, your cortisol levels are the highest when you first wake up in the morning just to get you out of bed, and then they naturally drop. So if you're putting coffee on an empty stomach straight away, we get unnecessary cortisol. So if you can hold off the first half an hour, 45 minutes. But yeah, just choosing your first thought intentionally and doing things like, for example, I will tell people to put breathe on their calendar as a labeled alarm littered throughout the day 4 times. And all that reminds you is because we even have something called email apnea in society now, studies show, which is quite literally when people are typing and they hold their breath whilst they're writing an email. And we're just not breathing properly, and not breathing properly tells your system you're stressed. So if, for example, you can put 5 labeled alarms throughout your day for just 5 minutes saying breathe, and that reminds you in that moment, okay, whatever I'm doing, I can stop for 5 minutes, because we all have 5 minutes. We go to the bathroom 1,000,000 times a day. We have 5 minutes to do that. Why? Because you have to. You have to look at okay, how many times can I actually put 5 minutes in my day consciously? Yeah. And, breathe and just actually extend your exhale, for example, in those 5 minutes. When you extend your exhale, that automatically puts your body back into rest and digest. And that's just getting your body into that state a tiny bit a day, even if you're continually stressed, makes a huge difference, because your body can't restore itself. It can't replenish itself unless it's in rest and digest state. When we're in fight and flight all the time, it's in survival mode. And so you want to just give it that space to be like, okay, everything's safe, it's okay. I mean, there's so many different practices you can do, for example, but it's just, if you can create 5 minutes every day to say okay, how do I feel, for example, and just get a journal out and write out, you know, your stresses, write out your thoughts and process, or do 5 minutes of breathing, or think an intentionally positive thought. That makes a huge difference.
I want to offer you a free tip. We once had to interview the deputy leader of the Labour Party here. I can't remember anything he said, actually, fun enough, about government or Labour, but he had a system where he had Bob Marley on his kind of Spotify.
Yeah.
And every time Bob Marley came on, he had to get up and dance,
I love that.
Oh, wow.
which I thought was lovely.
I love that idea. Actually.
Yes,
Yeah.
there you go. Thoughts? Yes, the front and then to the back here, yeah.
Hi. So, kind of, I guess it builds up quite nicely. Thinking a bit.
So what's your name?
Oh, Hannah.
Hannah.
Hannah, yeah. Thinking a bit about decision making and stress. So, if you are someone who is having to make a lot of decisions,
Yeah.
how that can have an impact on your stress, and also vice versa, when you are hugely stressed, how that can impact decision making, and then building, just adding another layer to that on what you were saying, Alice, and you're talking about fight or flight, but also like freeze when it comes to decision making, when you know, depending on what stage you're in life. So let's say either personal or having to make a lot of decisions in business. What's there?
Yeah.
If you put any light to shed on that.
Hold on, I'm going to take a run of different points and thoughts so we can get them. And will you just pass back? This is white.
You have to remember all of them.
I'm writing it down. Exactly.
Hi, Rachel. And there's a question around the use of the word stress and about the impact of like self-connection and in public discourse, the word stress we use to kind of cover a whole range of experiences on the start from your experience of stress, but quite it covers sort of grief and loss and workplace related stress, and when the music comes in everyday language, does that actually hide the emotions that we feel, and that help us arching on gratitude?
Yeah.
It's actually saying, I feel loss of me, I feel grief, I feel scared.
Okay, that's a fantastic question.
And Rachel, there's someone just behind you. Yeah. Hello.
Hi, Monique. If we relied on the fact that we live in a stressful world, and to want to be happier and have less stress, we have to have some form of growth mindset in the first place, to that positive thinking, to want to improve things. And in my own personal experience, just constant work and things eventually become habit. Appreciating different personality types and genetics, but is there something, an intangible, that you can explain as to why some people will never become their full potential happy and love express?
Yeah.
Oh, that is a cool question. Okay. All right. So
Decision.
Decision. So you've got Hannah's decisions and freeze, Monique's the word stress, and can I add a wrinkle just to your point about grief? And
yeah.
I'd like to just know where you stand on the spectrum between mental health is a thing, but psychological safety is not a thing. People who make that point, and then Monique.
Just to make it easier. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
And then Monique's, and now you want to pass this up between the two of you, and then Monique's the people who can't.
Okay, so I'll start with decision making, because that's the story of my life. So the story of my life is I always ran in business. I ran 130 countries and 14 disciplines. So if you just take the matrix of this, I always had endless decisions to make. Interestingly, what we don't notice is that the more decisions you make, the less impact each of those decisions has. Right. So the reality is that in my life running emerging markets before I ran Google X, I took $1 million decision almost every 10 minutes of the day, literally every 10 minutes of the day. And it may appear to be quite a big amount of money, but because I was making $1 million decision every 10 minutes, by definition, the total sum of millions of dollars I needed to make decisions on were much bigger than each one of them. Now, and that holds true, by the way, when it comes to taking your kids to school. Okay, if that involves 200 decisions or 20 decisions around which socks and which shoes and what needs to be in the lunchbox and so on and so forth, the impact of each of those decisions doesn't matter. really, other than very few, right? And I normally, what I've always done was I defined the decisions that mattered before I actually took decisions. So 99% of decisions that you take in your life have no impact on your life whatsoever, because you're going to change them along the journey, right? And the only thing you can do wrong about them is to freeze. By the way, the worst decision you can ever make is to freeze. So in software and technology, we used to do what we call A/B testing. So rather than spend 16 days analyzing a decision, we would just say, okay, let's run a quick test and then come again tomorrow and see what happens, right? And no single decision will ever break your back, other than the ones that you really prioritize, right? Do I want to stay in that relationship? Do I want to, have a child now or not? Do I want to, which car do I buy? Not a big deal. What's the worst that can happen? I lose a bit of money, right? And so step one is choose not to focus on all of them. Most of them need to just be done very quickly with a view that you can go back and review them anytime you want. But make sure that the decisions that really matter take a lot of your attention. Not a lot of your time, but a lot of your attention, meaning that you sit down attentively, you try to see the full situation and basically, basically deal with it. Don't ever freeze. Freezing is the worst thing you can ever do to decision making, right? Because the minute you freeze, the minute they all start to pile up, okay? Mm-hmm. So if you find yourself freezing, tell yourself, what's the closest decision to correct? Okay, I'll do that now and review in an hour's time or in a year's time or a month's time, whatever. When it comes to all of those emotions, Alice is the beautiful chapter on emotions. But I will probably say that each and every one of those triggers stress, right? So grief will trigger stress, workplace conflict will trigger stress, and so on and so forth. But a deeper understanding of each and every one of them is truly the core of this work, right? And I think the idea is... I should shut up and you should get about me. Yeah.
That's such a good question, because part of the problem we have today is that, well, as a society, we've been taught how to think and not how to feel. And our emotions are an amazingly complex language, right? As we now know, newest research from Professor Brené Brown at Stanford University is that we have 87 different emotions and human emotional experiences, but the average human can only name 3: happy, angry, and sad. And so if that's the reality, like you say, blanketing it under, stress of people saying, I feel stressed, it's actually so important to understand what those sub-emotions are that you feel as well. Like, do you feel overwhelmed? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel sad? All these different things. And so it's understanding that emotional language is the key to actually minimizing stress as well, because when you can understand what actual emotion you're feeling, you're then able to actually communicate it properly to others and then feel seen and heard. And half of the problem we have is, again, it's like saying, in a relationship, you're like, you don't understand how I feel. And it's like, well, maybe, but do you understand how you feel? If you actually said how you feel, because the difference in the nuances of our emotional language is so minute. And so I always said, like, we wrote it in the book, for example, the 87 that Brené Brown found. And if you can read that list, you can even find it online, but it's like you can read that list and you can see, okay, all those different ones. You'll actually start to recognize a lot within yourself as a person when you've experienced them. And then when you next experiencing it, then being able to actually articulate that. And the differences of the subtlety is so important because it shows you something really, really, really interesting. A negative emotion, I would say a negative emotion is only ever trying to show you one of two things. It's only ever trying to show you something outside of yourself that you need to take action on and change, or something inside of yourself that you need to process and heal. And so you can know the difference. It's only trying to alert you to something. For example, in her work, she looks at envy and jealousy. And the subtlety to explain this is, for example, jealousy is an experience that's mainly outside of yourself with 3 people, while envy is an experience with 2 people. And then within envy, there's 2 shades, and that shows you that exact thing of whether you need to take action on or process. So envy in its lighter shade is me being envious of Mo on holiday and thinking, oh, that's so wonderful. Mo deserves to be on holiday, but I wish I was on holiday as well. And that shows me, okay, maybe I need to book myself a holiday and take action. The darker shade of envy is when I see Mo on holiday and I think, that's not fair. Mo shouldn't be on holiday. I deserve to be on holiday. He shouldn't be. Mo does deserve a holiday. He shouldn't be on holiday at all. And that darker shade, when you can actually notice even the difference shows you that actually, you know, that's work I need to do on myself, for example, because why on earth should Mo be on holiday be offensive to me? So, you know, being able to actually truly understand your emotional language and, like you say, not blanket it into like just, I feel stressed, is really important. And it's a big part of our work in emotional stress. And
But can we just finish up with Monique's thing, which is, because you know that thing where you sit around and you're talking about a friend or a quote unquote friend of a friend, and you're like, yeah, try as much as you like.
Stress all the time.
This donkey is not changing.
Okay, so there are lots of layers to this. I will say, by the way, however, that clumping them all together is a trick that we've been using for the last few years to bring attention to well-being, right? Because I've worked for years in the corporate space and nobody's paying attention, right? And so the whole idea is that many of us we're not a big group that's been championing this for a while now. I'd probably say, you know, the last 10 years or so, where we're trying to say this is quite big, okay? And stress, interestingly, is the most monetizable, the quantifiable commercially for organizations, because it costs them so much. And so when we bring them all together, there is a bit of a like, hey, look, all of those different things that are happening are resulting in this, and this is quite big and expensive. Can we please try to do something about it? Can you please grow the budgets so that we can actually work with people on those things? So this is the reason why we bring them together. There are people in the world that will never learn, okay? And there are 3 layers for that. One is either awareness, okay, or skill, or discipline, neuroplasticity, basically. Right, and it's quite interesting. You know, I can easily tell you that if you cut sugar out of your diet, eat enough protein, work out 5 times a week, and sleep well, you're going to be very fit. Okay, knowing that doesn't make you fit. That's the interesting bit, right? So you have to actually do that stuff. You have to actually practice and practice and practice and practice. And the problem is, just like with going to the gym, the first time is very difficult, and so most people don't go the second time. The first time is difficult, the second time is more difficult. And so it's actually easier, believe it or not, with stress and mental health, I believe, right? Because neuroplasticity is something you can practice all day long. You don't have to be anywhere. You don't have to eat a lot of protein. You don't have to rest afterwards. You know, it's just, can we please take something that matters to me and work on it all the time? Sadly, for the people that are stressed all the time, or the people that are negative all the time, and so on, that's what they practice, right? So you would notice that they spend a lot of time looking at the negative side of the news, for example, or when they are in an argument with someone, they're always pinpointing what's going wrong. You know, I grew up an engineer, so I grew up in an engineering community. Most of my friends are engineers, and we would be sitting on a cafe, everything's wonderful, and looking at that one corner over there and saying, that's not a vertical angle. Like, it's not a 90 degrees, right? And it is, we train our minds to do that, right? And so suddenly you start to see, like, true engineers, a lot of Germans, for example. Any Germans in the room? Yeah, you see everything wrong with everything. That's to you know, it's neuroplasticity. You train your brain to see everything that's wrong, right? Now, the interesting thing is that it's actually reversible. What you use grows, what you don't shrinks, right? So there is a way for you to simply say, enough. You know, yes, I can spot everything wrong with this room. I promise you, I can still right now, okay? But it's not helping me in any way. Can I spot everything beautiful in this room? Can I spot everything that's wonderful in this experience? And that's a question of changing the 3 layers. One, a layer of awareness. Oh, damn, I am really negative. Layer of skill, okay? Oh, to change that, I need neuroplasticity, and layer of discipline, okay? Knowing that I need neuroplasticity is not enough. I'm going to work on it. And for most of the time, what I ask people to do is to pick one, right? So any time you want to attack any of your well-being challenges, do them one by one. Either start with the easiest one you can tackle, the most urgent one you can tackle, or you need to tackle, or the most important, the biggest in impact. But take one. And keep at it until it changes. Because once it changes, you've built enough neural networks, not only to make the next one easier, but you've actually taught your brain how to become disciplined. So you take one of them and you start with it. And I normally, believe it or not, start with the smaller ones. Okay? I don't start with a bigger challenge. I start with a small challenge because in fixing it, I'm teaching my brain to become disciplined. Okay? And then I take that and I do the next one and the next one and the next one. One last thing. If you have those people in your mind, in your life, run. I'm very serious.
No, I'm very, yeah.
Don't think of yourself as the hero, okay? Attend to yourself first before you help others. Until you're really solid, okay? Don't take the difficult cases. Tell them openly, tell them, I love you very much, I never want to see you again.
Mo and Alice, I have to...
Still train.
There's something slightly mesmerising about listening to you both, I have to say, because I just looked at my watch and we've run 10 minutes over and I...
Okay. Yeah.
And also I think there's something about a conversation like this, there'll be more conversation to be had as you're signing books and people are kind of coming up and asking you things directly. I wanted to say a thank you to you both, because I think that there's something really tricky in this subject. And you're right. I really get the idea that people say, "Well, you're not qualified. It's too, you know." And the risk is that we don't talk about these things. And there's something rather magic in this book, which is it's so practical, as well as being so thorough. It's so practical. So I wanted to say thank you. I want to make sure that people do. I did a thing, as Mo said the other day, and actually he was stuck on a stage about this high for about an hour and 15 minutes afterwards. As people, I hope they'll do the same to you again this evening, Mo, and to you too, Alice. There are books here. Please do stick around. The aim is this is an open newsroom, so we stick around and we talk to each other. I don't know, Lily, how do you want to do things? Are we planning to have Mo and Alice sign books at that very low table?
Please, that's up to us.
Maybe we can come and do it over here. But
Is that the first time we signed together?
Yeah.
yeah, so we're gonna so come and buy a book over here. Come and get Mo and Alice to sign there, or if you just want to come up and like share a thought or an idea, do that. Thank you very much for making the time this evening to come and be with us here in the Tortoise newsroom. But a big thank you to Alice Law and Mo Gawdat for sharing your thoughts. Thank you very much.